Hello and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Talk. My name is Steve Corwood and today I'm joined by David Cain from Connection Through Prevention. How are you doing, David?
Very well. It's prevention through connection, but that's fine.
You're always going to get it wrong there.
Yeah, but no, it's great to see you, Steve, and thanks for having me, mate.
Yeah, no, it's nice to have you on. And today we're going to be talking about mental health in the motor trade in particular. I know Nick couldn't join us today. He's in Ireland, having a big weekend. On this, looks like he's having a good session while he's there, drinking plenty of Guinness. But I know he was actually looking forward to this one. So, yeah, an important subject in the industry. But before we get onto it, I'm going to just have a little intro and then we'll get back to you. Right, Dave. Big subject, mental health in the motor trade. One, obviously, that more and more people need to become aware of. And really, I would probably say we should start with how you came to sort of get into the mental health space. And I know you and I have had plenty of conversations. We've worked together in the past. And obviously an overview of where you came from, how you ended up doing this job.
Yeah, great, mate. Yeah, so automotive background, as you know, worked with Ford predominantly for the majority of that, about 19 years. Like yourself, started selling cars, worked my way up through the tree, did some regional roles, did national roles, and ended up running a multi-site CMA in Manchester, approximately 300 million pound turnover across the three, I would say. Fully enjoyed my time in the trade. I'm sure we'll get talking about the pros and cons, but at its core, the motor trade, it opens opportunities for everybody. It's a very welcoming industry. People who work hard, can really move up the tree, which is I think what we both did really.
Yeah.
But from 2011 up to my departure from the motor trade in 2019, some series of life events really. Yes, work was, it's a stressful job when you're running a business of that size, and of course there's business challenges that come along, but the ones that really had a detrimental impact on my mental health was in my private life really, and life and traumatic events as opposed to business events, and unfortunately they were unchecked. I was very good at masking them. My colleagues, my family, my friends didn't see it for what it was. They basically took each thing in isolation. They didn't see what I like to call the spider's web. If you consider yourself to be the spider and you're on a web, that web is your life. And I don't think that they actually saw that web. They didn't see what was really going on. I always say that people don't worry about people like me because I was very extrovert, very confident to the outside world. I mean, you know this about me. I'm an Elvis tribute artist amongst many things that I do. So if you're going to stand up in front of 300 people and sing Elvis songs with a wig on and a jumpsuit, you're not somebody that people look at and go, I bet he's really struggling with his mental health. So like I say, all of these things became undetected. I experienced suicide, which was a very traumatic experience for anybody who goes through it. And, I decided at that point, what did I want to do with the rest of my career, really? And I'll be honest, I'm on a motor trade platform and people might dispute what I'm about to say. And I'm not saying this factually. I'm just going to hint at it. But, stigma does exist. And when I decided to do this, I had a choice. I could either do it warts and all and be open and honest, authentic and transparent to everybody and let them know what happened to me. Or I could try and embark on this journey, keeping that private. And me and my wife had lots of discussions because, as you know, I was in a prominent role. I was earning 6 figures a year, and your life is set up for that earning. And we've had to change a lot of the way in which we live. But we're very passionate now about what I do, and it's the right pathway for me. But we spoke about, well, if I do it the right way and openly talk about it, there's a really big chance I'll never work in the automotive industry again. And that was the risk that I took.
Being open and transparent is never easy.
No,
and I think, you know, a lot of them things that you've just said then, especially the stigma, you know, whether people like it or not, it is attached to the trade. You know, there's a bravado that comes along with it, and there's almost a persona that we have historically had to sort of upkeep. Do you reckon that's part of the reason why the external sources like your family and friends and everything else probably didn't see what was going on, and they thought, well, you know, we're predominantly built into these figures of responsibility, and we're very good at masking it. And, you know, do they think that we can handle anything that's chucked at us? Do you think that's one of the reasons it's overlooked?
I think the way in which men look at themselves and our role in society plays a significant part in it. I mean, I always talk about this. You know, my father's father was from the war generation. They were, you know, I don't think we'll ever have a generation like that again. We talk about, you know, head down, keep ploughing on. That's what they did. And you know, my father was taught what a man's role was. You know, you're there to support. You've got to be the strong one. You've got to be this. You've got to be that. You've got to be the other. And that's coming to us. But, you know, I know what you're like with your children, because I see you, you know, and you talk openly about your relationships with your wife and your kids. I talk exactly the same. And I'd like to think that our boys, you know, when they were, certainly, you know, Aaron in my case, when he grows up, he's going to be very open and honest with his feelings. He's going to be very open and honest, very transparent. He's not afraid of crying. He understands that actually vulnerability is one of the best traits in a man, and that actually is what a lot of women like about their husbands. When they're truly vulnerable, that's when they connect the most. And of course, prevention through connection, it's not just about mental health, it's about connection in general. And I think, you know, if men can learn to be more vulnerable, it will improve their relationships no end. So I think that, you know, we're our own worst enemy in that case. And, you know, I've met many people who, you know, if you look at the statistics, every statistic. So, you know, you consider, you know, mental health, suicides. Men are 3 times more likely than women to die by suicide. 3 times more likely. That's
a scary number, that, when you think about it. And you think that's because the majority of reason, again, back to this, we bottle it up. We bottle it up, and we don't think that we should, you know, I don't like saying it, but I think there's too many men that think that it's weak in terms of being able to show their emotion and how they actually feel. And it's masked over by the bravado. And then it just blows up.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the problem with men as well is that there's a great quote that I've learned on my journey that, you know, hurt people. And that's what we do. When we're, you know, even though we're masking, because we're hurting inside, the world is against us. We go into victim mentality. We don't start to see life, you know, with a wise mind. We just don't do that. And ultimately, we lose ourselves and we start to hurt the people around us. And, you know, nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to do that. And my rebirth, for want of a better word, I've had to go through some really challenging times in the fact that I didn't like the person that I've become. I understand, you know, when I went on the journey of understanding how did I get there. Yes, there was the traumatic events. Yeah, there was things that I didn't handle as I should have done. Yes, there was opportunities to be open and honest that I didn't take. But equally, the person that I turned into, I didn't recognize. I didn't recognize that person. It wasn't the person I was brought up to be.
Do you reckon? I mean, I know for facts, and whether people admit it or not, that there's a lot of people, not just in our industry, but in general, who actually get to that point in life and they start to assess. And sometimes that can not make things worse because it becomes reality. But it makes it hard for them to deal with. And it takes a drastic shift and a drastic change for people to make the changes. And that means making some sacrifices and moving away from the old behavior that we're accustomed to, especially in our trade that's attached to it. And, you know, there's a lot of behavior that's attached to it. And I think there's a lot more people out there that than let on that they'd like to make that change, but they just keep the bravado.
Absolutely. And the thing with the automotive industry, it's very, very well paid. And, you know, like I said very early in the piece, it's very welcoming to all. So, you know, when you go into the motor trade as a sales executive, and let's say, you know, you've not gone through the education system, and let's be fair, you can go through the education system now and get a degree and have a job for 16 grand. So that really doesn't matter one way or the other. But you know, a lot of graduates, in fact, that's probably a good place to start. A lot of graduates, you know, they would go into a job that eventually might pay them a six-figure salary, but actually start off less than earning what a sales executive earns. So a lot of people find their way into car sales, and the initial reaction is, wow, look at how much money I'm making. But money is a drug. You know, money is a drug, and when you're on that, you know, like any drug, it's very difficult to get off it, because when you're used to a certain level of income.
Yeah, it's so hard to get off the horse. I mean, I don't know many people in this trade in particular have thought, oh, you know what I could do with getting out. And one of the main reasons why they don't is exactly just what you said. You know, it pays well. If you're good at your job, you put the work in, you dedicate yourself to it. You see it as a career, especially if you see it as a career, then it's gonna, you know, you're gonna reap the rewards. I think you're right, exactly. It's a good industry to get into, to earn money, and it can come out of nowhere, and then it's very hard for anyone to sort of go the other way. And the reality of the situation, there's a lot of laddish behavior that goes on as well, you know, alcohol and drugs, and whatever else goes on. And it's sort of, again, back to the bravado. And, you know, we've all been, I don't know about yourself, but, you know, I've been victim of that type of behavior as well in the past, because that's, you know, it was part and parcel of the job. You went out with the guys, and you know, you got on a big night out, and that's the way that it was. Doesn't make it right, but it's different for some people to understand what is right and what is wrong, and what you want back in the long term, and how long it takes for you until you start to hit a brick wall. Do you think that's sort of inherently ingrained into the industry?
Culturally, the industry for me have got a lot of work to do. There's an underlying culture in the industry. I mean, what you're talking about there, you know, whether it be recreational drugs, whether it be alcohol, you know, time is it. I always talk when I come to the automotive industry, I always talk about time. There seems to be this KPI of time in the motor industry. How much time you stay in the dealership. You know, it's crazy. We create this culture of always on. You know, you talk about leavism. You know, the amount of managers today in the automotive industry who are doing emails on holiday, and that's not good for them. It's not good for the connection with their families. But equally, what you're doing is you're setting a precedent to the people that you manage, that when they go on holiday, they're still working.
Yeah,
you know, and that's the danger. You know, it's this danger, and what we need to do in the industry is come away from this. You're the first to turn the lights on. You're the last to turn the lights on. You never have a day sick. I mean, I always say to HR professionals, if you have got a very, very low sickness rate, you have a problem, because everybody's allowed to be sick. So if you've got a department which is showing that the people in that department are never sick, I'd be looking at that department and going, hang on, culturally, there's something wrong here. Because we must have some sort of sickness. We can't have no sickness. So what's creating that behavior? And it's this behavior of people don't feel like they can have the day off. I mean, you know, the amount of times I was contacted on my day off. I mean, you know, you'd be the same.
Yeah, I used to go in on my day off to do my handovers, so I was free for the rest of the week to just sell motors. You know, and I worked a 6-day week anyway. So, you know, day off on a Wednesday, and these are the things that cause not just the work. Not while you're in work, but these are the things that cause frictions for you at home as well. And I think that's the bigger picture. But you know,
on that point, Steve, on that point, we are not kind to ourselves as human beings, and actually, we're quite delusional at times. And I say this for society. The amount of times in our lives that we have heard our wives say to us, "Leave work at the door," and vice versa. You know, when you've got to work, leave home at the door. We carry our experiences with us every minute of the day. And if an individual is currently going through challenging times, whether that be at home or at work, they need to be able to talk openly and freely about it without any stigma, without any fear. And what I say to all managers is this: if you have a performance issue, let's look at this for what it is. You have employed this person. So this person, in your opinion, at the point of actually employing them, can do this job. It could be that the person that you've now got a performance issue with has worked with you for 4, 5, 6, 7, 20 years, whatever it may be. They may have an exceptional record. They may, an exceptional work record. But all of a sudden, there's some sort of performance issues. Culturally, what happens in the motor trade is we now draft HR in. We have a problem. We want to make this formal. We want to start putting the pressure on. No. What we need to do in this industry is go, hang on a minute. Let's try and fix the person. Let's look at the individual. What's going on with this individual? Because this hasn't just happened overnight. We need to understand what is creating this behavior, what is creating this very competent salesperson, service advisor, body shop, whatever it may be, this competent person that we know, what has now brought them to this point. And I was a great example of that. I was nowhere, I'd created this downward spiral in working in life. And there was an absolute opportunity. I go, hang on, this isn't right. Something's not right here. He can't all of a sudden be. I mean, I say my mask was on steroids. I was acting that much that I was going back to Elvis. Elvis in 1977 was a caricature of Elvis in '69. That's what he was. He was acting Elvis. He was no longer Elvis. I was acting David Cain.
What other signs can we look for in terms of depression or poor mental health? And something that we can all look out for while we're sat in the workplace, or we're worried about another individual and that performance has dropped off, or they're just not themselves. Is there any particular signs that that we can quickly sort of look at that could help us all as employers or employees help co-workers?
There is no quick win to this, none. And I think that's where I see a lot of, at the moment, the PR piece and what people are doing. There is no quick win to this. And, the first thing I would say to anybody who's watching this, if you are seeing people that you've invested in to go on a first aid for mental health course, who are on their social media saying that they have now got their certificate and to come and see them, I would question how well you've invested your money. And the reason I'm saying that is, anybody who knows anything about mental health knows that people aren't just going to suddenly talk to them. You've got to go and sit. My hashtag, the whole thing around prevention through connection is the hashtag feel, see, and listen. The onus isn't on the person who is in crisis. The onus is on us. It's on us to feel it, to see it, and to listen for it, and then to act on it. How proactive.
What sort of things do we need to be listening for, or what type of things do we need to look out for?
Well, just very, very, very briefly, because obviously, like I say, there's no quick win. It's very, very broad, as you know, but it's the feel bit. So, I always say, I talk about feel. We all have an aura, Steve. Every single one of us. We all have an aura. Okay. So when you get in from work at night, and I know, of course, you work with the missus, but when you get in, let's talk about your kids. Yeah. When you walk in at night, before your kids say anything to you, you pretty much know what type of day they've had. You feel it. You haven't even said anything.
It's funny that, because like even when I was back on the sales floor years ago and everything else, as soon as I walked through the door, when I wasn't working with the missus, as soon as I walked through the door, she knew. Yeah. She knew if I'd had a good day or a bad day. And she just knew as soon as I walked through the door. So the aura, the vibe, the type of individual that we get to know starts to change. And is that feel about it is one of the big giveaway telltale signs.
Especially in business. There's a gut. I mean, I remember when I first came to your business. Yeah. There was a feel to it. And it's probably why we ended up doing work together, because I felt that your vision was the right vision. I could see the care that you had in your people. I could see the way they interacted with you. You felt that actually, this is a pretty sound culture that Steve's created. I felt that when I walked in. Back in dealerland, you could have the same dealer group and you'd walk in two dealers who are 10, 15 minutes away from each other. And without anybody saying anything, the moment you walked through the door, you felt it. You felt if that dealership was on a high, and you felt if that dealership was on a low. And it's exactly the same with people. When you're in the company of others, you feel something. You feel either that this person is okay, or you feel something isn't right. And it's about listening to that gut instinct. Now, it's not, that doesn't mean that you turn to that person straight away and say, are you considering taking your own life? That'd be absolutely ludicrous. But what that is something that should be stored in your brain. Right, I've just felt something there that isn't great. Now let me take a step back. What's this spider's web for this person looking like at the moment? Do I know if they've gone through any trauma, life-changing events recently? Am I seeing behavioural changes, physical changes, emotional changes, cognitive changes? What am I seeing in this person? And this is why I say it's a very complex thing to do. And actually, like anything, it's a skill, and you've got to learn how to do this skill. You have to. We're not born with this instinct. None of us are. We've got to learn.
Well, that's why people like yourself exist. And I think one of the things that feeling listen is massive. I think in that scenario, and I think that sometimes in the workplace, what we need to be able to do is go and either put, some people like an arm put around them. It's like anything. Some people like a different approach, but being able to address it in a manner, even from a colleague to colleague point of view, you might have two salespeople on the sales floor. One of them's thinking, what's wrong with him? He's off, something, if they get that gut feeling that, how should that person sort of not interject, because they're not going to be, interject, but they're not going to be able to advise. But what should they do to try and note or, help them in the right direction to speak to somebody that they should be speaking to?
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, the first thing I'd say to that is that if a colleague on a level with another colleague is feeling that, then you would hope that their manager does, because you'd have to question the relationship and the connection between manager and their people straight away. If it's colleague to colleague, then it could be just something as simple as, come on, let's go and get dinner together. Let's just go and get dinner together. And I always say, don't do mental health by stealth. Tell them what you've felt. Tell them what you've seen. It might be the first time that they're reflecting on what they're presenting. And I always say that's a very powerful thing to say that. When you repeat back to people their words, they may be hearing them words for the first time. And Steve, if you're hearing your words for the first time, that's going to be far more powerful. Yeah, far more powerful than hearing what I've got to say to you today. It really is. Have I really just said that? Well, yeah, you did. And then you take that moment of reflection. Yeah, I did just say that. That doesn't sound like me. Why have I said that? And what you're asking that person to do is evaluate where are you at? Because what you're saying, what you're projecting, what you're doing, this is what we're doing. Yeah. But then equally, again, going back to me in 2016, 17, 18, if that individual is that far down the track in terms of their mental health journey, they're probably not going to reflect. They're probably going to fight. They're probably going to pass it away. And it's about, persistent. And you can't do it. The amount of people who tried to help me, but they tried to help me in 2 minutes conversation.
Yeah.
2 minute passing conversation. Or you got it third hand, such and such a body. Nobody actually took me into an office and actually asked, how are you, mate? Something's not quite right here. We've invested. Your career has been at a promotion every 2.5, 3 years. We've had big hopes for you, big aspirations for you, but all of a sudden,
you're not yourself.
Something's not right. It's just something not right. You're not getting it. No matter how many times we tell you, you're not quite getting something right. At what point is that person going to go, well, hang on a minute? This might not be a work issue. This might be an individual issue. It might be them. So it's about that. And I think that going back to the manager piece, if we're going to truly prevent it in the workplace, colleague reviews are essential, and the language we use in business. So a one-to-one performance review is what a lot of businesses call, if they actually have one, a performance review every month. Change the words, call it a colleague development review. Yeah, because that's going to change the whole tone of this conversation. If a colleague is going into a room with his manager or her manager for a colleague development review, they're probably going to be far more open, less anxious than if you say it's a performance review. And actually, the way these reviews should start is not. We don't start with performance. We start with the individual. How are you?
Yeah.
About you.
Do you think we can be doing more on a daily basis as leaders or managers? I mean, one of the things I try and do is have general conversation. Talk about the footy. Talk about whatever else, chat absolute crap for 5-10 minutes. see where people are at, you know, and try and gauge where they're up to, what the mood's like, you know. There's always a theory, and you know, when I walk in sometimes, and sometimes it's like, you know, sometimes people think, oh, people are messing around. There's no, you know, you're doing this too much, doing that too much. There's got to be an element of that for you to understand what's going on with the people, with the individuals, what they've been up to over the course of the weekend. If you've got somebody that's really not wanting to take part in the conversation come Monday morning, this is the way I look at it, then what's happened over the weekend? You all right? You know, is something gone on? You know, has he gone out, got smashed, ended up in another fight because he loves a brawl? You know, that's just cliche, but it's, you know, it's relevant. Do you think just general conversation a little bit more, rather than this robotic sort of red tape approach that we have in the workplace, can help from a management stroke business owner point of view?
Yeah, again, it's this connection piece. I mean, it's very easy to have a conversation with somebody, but it's a completely different thing to be connected in that conversation. I mean, you just mentioned about them being disengaged. My challenge would be, well, what if they're overly engaged? Because they could be masking. You know, so it goes both ways. It's about knowing your people. It's about knowing your people. It's about being I mean, what you've just described there is, you know, absolutely the right thing to do. You're being available for your people. You're putting yourself in their space. You're being around them. You're giving yourself the opportunity to feel something, to have some sort of connection with them. But connection's tough, because you've got to be able, you know, I always say, you know, if I walk past Motor Connect today and you're on the forecourt, I've got two choices if I'm walking past. Yeah, I can either look over the fence and go, "Hey up, Steve, you all right?" And you go, "Yeah, Dave, mate, I'm Sam, cheers, mate," and I carry on walking. But guess what? You're conditioned to say you're all right, the same way I was conditioned to say I'm all right. Or I've got the other choice of going, "Hey, up there, Steve," walking onto the forecourt, standing next to you, looking in your eyes, because the eyes, you know, people always say, you know, they're a way into the soul, and they absolutely are. You know, I always talk about Mel B. If you actually look at Mel B in the Spice Girls, her eyes there, and her eyes when she was actually going through domestic violence, they're just vacant eyes. You know, the eyes have gone. So it's about, you know, looking at who is this person. And what the brain does as well is it stores images of Steve Corwood in my mind. Stores images. So if I don't challenge my mind to look at Steve with fresh eyes, it's just going to tell me what I'm seeing. It's Steve. This is Steve. But how is Steve? You know, and think of that comes down
to body language as well.
Everything.
The way, just everything. General persona,
yeah. But think of it from the point of view of COVID. Yeah. So think from it from a physical perspective. Yeah. When we went into COVID, when we went into lockdown, how many mates of yours, family members of yours, when you came out of don't name them because you might upset them, but how many of your mates, when you came out of COVID, did you look at and go, you know, you've put some weight on? Yeah. Oh, this is aged, yeah. Oh, it could have gone the other way. Dear me,
it went the other way for some, me being one of them.
Yeah, decided to get fit. But again, Steve, yeah, as great as that is for you getting fit, physical exercise is a drug that actually can become unhealthy.
Well, you're exactly right. And that's one of my talking personally. You know, I was speaking to a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago, and he said, your OCD's kicking in with your exercise. You're obsessed. And you know what? That's my behavior. That is the way I am. I'm literally do. I mean, I've got it a little bit more. I still exercise a hell of a lot pretty much every day, but that helps my mental state, if anything else. But I've gone a bit more relaxed around it, apart from I've got a challenge coming up. But
it's all
but you know, it is, you know, there's so many triggers, I think, that you can see. And going back to the coronavirus, I think there was something, I wrote it down here somewhere. There was surveys taken between 2019, July, and March 2020. And it rose by 19% by June 2020 in terms of severe depression and mental health issues had gone. So that 20% in that space of time in during the pandemic. And then it's still 17, August 2021, the proportion of adults with moderate or severe depressive symptoms had fallen. So coming back out of the COVID situation had fallen back down. But overall, there's still a massive increase after COVID, and a lot of, and this is in general, not just not just the motor trade. And I think this is something that I've noticed as an individual with friends. I've noticed certain elements within myself, the way that I've started to think about what's going on out there in the world, how I should be living my life, what should I be doing? Are certain sacrifices worth it? Is there more to it? These are all the type of questions that I think there's a lot more of that happening now.
Self-care and self-MOTs are really important. But here's the thing. Statistics around mental health are flawed. Every one of them. And if you speak to, academia, speak to the press, they will tell you that. They can only report what they know. And mental health is hidden. Now, what we saw during the pandemic was, because everybody was experiencing the same thing, there was probably less stigma saying you were struggling through the pandemic, because everybody was. What we're now going to is back to the normal state. And that is even more concerning. And, this massive PR drive that we're doing well, that we're moving in the right direction. I would challenge that. And I would challenge that. Let's go to the pandemic. What, to your recollection, what was the highest R rate that you can remember for COVID per 100,000 people? What was the highest?
I can't remember, Dave. I turned it off. It was doing my head in. It was causing me problems, so I just turned it off. I ignored it.
Okay, well, look, and this is going to surprise people. So we went into lockdown for COVID. Yes, it was a pandemic. And I can't remember many times where it got into double digits. I don't even think it did. I can't remember it getting to double digits. It might have been in areas, but certainly not nationally. Yeah. Here's some sobering thoughts for you. Okay. Latest statistics, 15.3 per 100,000 males suicide rate.
Wow.
Right. That's in England. 10.3 in Wales.
And this is
15 in Scotland. Now,
this suicide rate as well.
The overall suicide rate in England in 2020, the latest figures, was 15.3 per 100,000 for the males and 4.9 per 100,000 for the females. And look at the amount of money we spent on COVID. Look what we did for COVID. And what I would say to people is that if I am right, and I'm not saying I am, it's an opinion, but if I am right, that mental health is slowly but surely going to start going under the radar again, which it probably will in terms of statistics, because it's not as safe anymore to talk about it. And people say, well, we keep telling people to talk about it. Ant and Dec tell you on Saturday Night Takeaway to talk about it. I didn't talk to my wife about it for 7 years. What makes you think that Ant and Dec, or just because you're flashing a badge on LinkedIn, that all of a sudden somebody in crisis is going to approach you to tell you that they're starting to really struggle with their mental health and well-being? It's about you, us, society, staying on this journey, increasing our knowledge of how to feel it, how to see it, how to listen for it, and not be afraid of acting on it, not being afraid of asking challenging questions that we won't want to ask. Who wants to ask somebody, are you considering taking your life? Nobody does. And the chances are, statistically, we're never going to ask that question. But if we're coming from a place of care, if we've earned the right through analysing a person through what their experience, what we believe their experience, the behavioural factors, emotional, cognitive, physical factors, if we have invested enough in our connection with that individual where we're saying to ourselves, right, I do need to have a conversation with this person because I am concerned, because this is not them. There's loads of things going on here, and I need to be that bridge. I need to go to them. I need to be their conduit, their support for getting better. If you're coming from a place of care, what friend, colleague, or family member is going to be upset about you asking them questions? Nobody.
Exactly. It's a case of care. And I think on a bigger picture, I think, there's a huge problem with it from the top to the bottom. And I think what actually needs to happen is a huge cultural shift in our whole society. not just certain industries, individuals. I think there needs to be a huge cultural shift. Normally that starts from school, teaching people what they should know, what they shouldn't know, what signs to look out for. This is what you can do. It's part of the cultural shift, the behavior of individuals. It all comes down to culture. No matter, this is why no matter where you go around Europe or in the world, you see different cultures, different type of behaviors. You always get the bad eggs wherever you go, but in terms of the actual culture, the behavior, and the approach to life is so varied. And I think the British in particular have got a really bad approach to how we should be living a life from a cultural perspective, from top to bottom. And that needs to change, and it needs to change somewhere. It needs to start at the top, because it needs to be educated and passed down and passed through. But
Steve, but that comes again back to money. We live our lives in a social media world. We try and present an illusion that we are multimillionaires. We believe that we deserve to be the next Britain's Got Talent. That's the world that we now live in, and that brings with it very disruptive and destructive cultures and the way we see the world. And again, going back to the money element of it, when you're on a gravy train of something, it's very difficult, whether that be drugs, alcohol, cash, whatever. When you're in a cycle and when you're in a habit, it's very difficult to break that. But what I would say to everybody, I'm not for one moment downplaying how great the motor industry can be, and at many places is. It's a great industry. It could be so much better, but it's a great, great industry. But let me tell you now, I was earning a lot of money in the motor trade. In the September, when I broke down in front of my wife, we made decisions based on money. We made decisions that I was going to power through it with her help and only her help. We didn't even mention it to family. We tried our best to manage it, and it was a flawed approach, and it led to my experience of suicide. Okay, it was a flawed approach, and when we actually look back at it now, there was only one reason we did that. It was money. No other reason. It was just money. We were so fearful of me losing my job. Now, let me tell you now, my business is still in its infancy. I'm building it up. Am I earning what I was earning at the motor trade? Absolutely not. Are we have we got the capability that we used to have 2 holidays a year and all the rest of it? No, we haven't. Have we had to look at we're suddenly now buying cars. We're not being supplied them through my workplace. So our entire finances have changed. I'm earning nowhere near what I earned. But let me tell you now, as a family unit, we've adapted and we're happier than we've ever been.
That's all. That's what it's about, Dave. I mean, that's exactly what people misconstrue. We've always had this mantra that, shit or bust, no matter what happens, wherever we are as a family unit, we're at home. And fortunately, I've had a decent enough run. We never know when our runs come to an end. Something changes personally, might change. Something can happen that makes you totally shift your way and your thought of how you want to live your life. And hearing that is something that people really should take note of. And if they're going through, for anybody that's listening now, if they feel like they're in that position where they feel they're not being heard, they're in that difficult situation, they may be contemplating suicide, they may have had suicidal thoughts, they may just be feeling really depressed. What should they do? What's the first thing they should do?
Well, look, empowerment comes with responsibility, and I would say this to everybody, if you're communicating with somebody who you believe is a risk to their own health or other people's health, the responsibility is never going to be yours. It's always with the individual. The responsibility for my mental health and my suicide was mine and mine alone. So the first thing that individual has to do is take responsibility. Yes, they need a good support network around them, but they just need to take responsibility for themselves. That is absolutely essential. What I would say to anybody now who's listening to us, to somebody in this world, we are the most important person in their life. Guaranteed. Every single one of us has one person at least that no matter what, they will always be there, and you are the most important person in their world.
that's a great way for us to finish, actually. I think it's been a great insight in terms of what we need to look out for, why we need to be looking out for it more than anything else, and what people can do to sort of help and make sure they're making the right decisions. So on that note, I'm going to sign us off, Dave, and we'll crack on. But thanks very much for coming on. And if you are listening or watching, if you're watching, you'll be on YouTube. Please make sure you subscribe, like, and share. It does help us, obviously, when we're doing this, when we're producing this. And if you're on Spotify or any other major streaming channels where you're listening to it, make sure that you subscribe on there as well and share. And much appreciated. Thanks, Dave. And
look after yourself, mate.
Thank you very much. Thanks.